So if everything is working, good day, everyone. My name is Michal Smetana, and I'm a research coordinator of the Peace Research Center Prague, which is a center of excellence established by the Charles University. And it's a big pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of our research center. And I'm actually really sorry that we could not meet at our conference room as we originally planned, especially since our center has a brand new office space, and we are quite excited to show you all around and welcome you here. But well, let's not waste our precious time here today. Let me just say that this particular topic of grant applications is extremely important for us. We are a research center which is established particularly thanks to the project funding, so we need to constantly seek funding opportunities in order to keep us running. So I would like to thank Kamil for this initiative and for inviting four distinguished speakers to give us some tips and tricks that will come in handy once we apply for our next research grant. Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to the debate.
All right. Good morning to everybody. Good morning, Michal, and of course, good morning again to all the speakers. So before we start, let me just introduce myself and a little bit what the idea behind this event is. So my name is Kamil Klosek. I am currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Peace Research Center Prague. And I came up with this idea together with Michal during a discussion because we talked about the grant applications. And I need to say I'm a recent graduate. I finished my Ph.D. just last year. So I'm somebody that you can call an early career researcher or early career academic. And I have never in my life like assembled a team. I never wrote a grant application to one of these big grant agencies, especially not in the Czech Republic like we have here with the famous Gatcher. And during the discussion, we decided, hey, wouldn't it be a nice idea to share the knowledge of experienced researchers who already had success in the past with research applications, with grant applications, to share it a little bit with the younger audience. So we came up and decided to make it as a roundtable, to have different perspectives on it, different personal stories, different ideas. And yeah, and we hope that this event that is now live streamed on Facebook will help everybody, not just me, but everybody who is thinking about to write grant applications, who wants to go in academia and think about if this is something for him or not, that we will actually contribute with this roundtable. Let me make just a few words for the format for everybody who just logged in. So I will ask each of our speakers to have a short presentation that lasts between 10 to 15 minutes to talk about their personal experience with regards to the grant applications and what they would actually like to tell us as young researchers how to succeed in the grant applications process. We will then make a short break for around 10 minutes. And in the meantime, I would heavily encourage everybody who's right now watching on Facebook to write down questions below the live stream. We will gather them, and then during the Q&A session, we will select a few of them, or maybe all, depends how many we will get, and then we will ask our speakers their opinions on these questions. And you are free to ask questions to everybody, or if you have specific questions to one of our speakers, please feel free to just write, I would like to ask speaker 1 or 2 or 3 this particular question. All right, we have today a big array of distinguished guests. We have Dr. Petr Kratochvíl from the Institute of International Relations, and also Ondřej Ditrych, who is also from the Institute of International Relations. So welcome you both. I'm really happy that you came. The same applies to you, Šárka. Šárka is from the Metropolitan University in Prague here. So we are a big Prague team. And Michal, of course, is here at our Peace Research Center and also involved in research grants, just recently got very successful. So we are very happy to also hear his opinion. So with this area of distinguished guests, I will leave now the floor to Dr. Petr Kratochvíl from the IIR. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the whole roundtable.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Kamil, for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. And indeed, this is a timely event, timely both in general, but also for me personally speaking, because I'm just preparing for writing an interim report on one of our Horizon 2020 projects in which I'm involved. But also the next round of reviews of a different type of Horizon related programs, which will be starting in a month's time in Brussels, or probably online, but it will be starting. So it is a timely thing. I structured my presentation in the following way. I'll first give you a caveat of my own, kind of perhaps a bit controversial, because I'm not entirely happy with the entire grant application mechanism. So I'll just very briefly explain why I have my reservations there. And then I'll talk, in spite of this, I'll try to focus on three general pieces of advice that I think are essential for having a successful grant application. I'll leave the questions posed before asked by the organizers for the Q&A session. So I'm sure there will be time for that later on. Let me start with arguing that if you believe that receiving a grant will somehow allow you to follow your wildest academic dream, I think that you are wrong. Because I think that grant proposing is first and foremost a disciplinary measure. It makes you compliant with the whole system of academic business. By submitting a grant, you have to comply first with the competition logic. You have to compete with others for money. It also means that when you submit a grant, it makes you accept academic hierarchies, because you seek approval by the senior members of the evaluation committees, right? So you kind of get socialized. You have to give your implicit approval with all these structures. So in that sense, it is indeed a disciplinary instrument. And I'm sure many of you have wondered why, from time to time, why Professor X or Dr. Z got that grant, given that she or he is not the brightest person you know. And I think this is the answer, because having a grant is neither a sign of academic excellence, nor an end goal of one's academic career. So we have to bear this in mind, that my caveat is that having a grant should always be secondary. It is instrumental to your real research goals. It helps you with money, with networking, with travel, with your career prospects perhaps as well, but that's it. So, and this is why I'm talking about this, because succeeding in a grant application and being academically excellent are two very different things. They may overlap sometimes, but very often they do not. So we have to bear this in mind, that we are talking, or I will be talking more about the specific techniques or skills that you need for you to be successful. And of course, you might wonder why I don't speak about how that you have to have this great idea. And of course you do, but that's not what I'm talking about. So talking about the strategy of applying successfully, I will try to give you three pieces of broad advice that I consider essential for you to succeed. Now, the first advice is consider any project application as a tool helping you to do the research you want to do. Now, that sounds simple or simplistic even, but in reality, it very often happens that people apply for projects they are not really interested in, just because there is money in it, or because your colleagues need you in a team, or because the project consortium is prestigious. I, unfortunately, myself have also an experience like that. And what it does to you is that it leads you to either hating the project or being bored with the project, or even worse, it distracts you from the research you really want to be doing. So please don't do that, even though it might be attractive, it might be enticing for you, but that's not the way to go. In short, you should be an expert on the topic. It should fit in your career path. And this is also related to another thing which I have plenty of experience with as a reviewer, especially for the Horizon 2020 programs. Very often you see a professor who was added to the proposal just for the sake of his or her title, or because he or she has a high age index. Now, this very often casts a shadow over the entire project. So this strategy, while it might seem logical to have somebody who is influential or has written on the topic in the team, this is very often very visible after you read the project as a reviewer. So please don't artificially add somebody who does not belong. But that is also applies also in the opposite sense. Sometimes it happens that you have a junior scholar who is included in the proposal with no relevant prior experience on the topic. And then again, one wonders why that is the case. Will he or she do the real job for the big names in the projects? So if you want to do something like that, then an explanation is needed. But again, it's tricky. So again, to cut the long story short, apply for projects where your expertise lies, or where the focus of your dissertation is, if you are in your PhD studies. And finally, still speaking about the first point, I have realized throughout my career that very often what is also quite important is applying for a type of project that kind of corresponds to your personality. So there are people who like to work alone, basically. There are people like me who like teams, collaborative research. So again, you should think about what kind of project is comfortable for you. Do you want to work with 20 other people, or just one, or alone? And that's also important, because that then defines different types of agencies you can apply with. So that's number one. Number two, I don't believe that there is such a thing as a generally good grant application. It is always contextual. So this idea that you sometimes hear, that if you fail with a project somewhere, you just take it and forward it to another agency, I think that is completely wrong. And I really wonder whether that can ever work, because agencies are very different, and even individual programs within the same agencies are very different. Some of them focus more on the basic research, some more on the applied, some put more stress on theory, some more on empirical research, single person or large teams, etc., etc. So I don't really think that there is a generally good grant application. And for you to create a project that is good within a context, when applying in a tender, in a program, with an agency, you have to learn what the agency expects and what language it speaks. I mean, it may sound superficial, but I think this is really essential. Again, just to give you very concrete examples from my experience, when, for instance, I'll now be talking about the MSCA action, Marie Skłodowska-Curie action. So it's the mobility excellence project with the European Union. Now, there are 3 criteria, sometimes 5, but I don't want to complicate that. But among the 3 criteria, one of them is, now I'm quoting, potential of the researcher to reach professional maturity. And another one is enhancing the future career prospects. So professional maturity and enhancing career prospects. Now, at first hearing, for you probably as well as for me, these sound almost the same. And very often it happens that people somehow combine these two haphazardly in the proposal and then get minus points. And it's really difficult to, even for me, always before evaluating, I have to reread through the guidelines to understand what these criteria mean. So, and this is just one of many examples that you have to follow if you want to succeed. Another simple one, milestones and deliverables. I mean, if you, in your proposal, instead of deliverables, talk about output, number 1, number 2, and so on, and instead of milestones, you would be talking about the whatever endpoints of phase 1, phase 2. Now, you would not pass. You would not pass, you would fail, because you do not have deliverables as defined in the proposal. So, you know, these, it might seem as nuances and details, but they are extremely important, that you have to speak the language they expect from you. So, in fact, you have to comply with the way they themselves phrase the way the project should be construed. Now, it is also important in this context to know to whom you speak. I mean, it differs. Sometimes it is important to understand whether you speak to a Czech audience or an international one, right? Are the reviewers, for instance, when applying to the Czech grant agency or the technological agency, are the reviewers Czech or from abroad? And very often happens that there are projects that assume that it will be all Czech, and all the references, even in the theoretical part, are to some Czech authors. And I don't want to denigrate Czech authors, but very often it is concepts that originates with somebody abroad. And then when you get a foreign reviewer, they obviously wonder why you would not refer to the original text. Another example that is very important, when I assume most of us are generally belong to the political science field, and in the Czech grant agency, the panel that accepts and evaluates the proposals in political science is a combined panel where half the people are political scientists and half are lawyers. Surprisingly, it's not sociologists, it's not anthropologists, whatever, it's lawyers, and they have a very different understanding of what good research is. They almost never use theories, they don't have any kind of research design as we understand it, which means that you have to bear this in mind. Either narrow down your argument and say that in political science we do this and this, or broaden the argument and talk about broader social science and humanities, and speak in a language that is understandable to people outside of our own discipline. So again, this very often plays the role, and there, frankly, and I think I can say that openly, we had never-ending discussions between lawyers and political scientists within the panel about the merits of a particular project. And finally, still speaking about the second point, also research excellence is defined very differently in different programs. So to give you one example, I am now a member of a large consortium dealing with differentiated integration within the EU. And there are 3 such consortia. So 3 is quite interesting, an exceptional situation. All 3 consortia have been awarded the money. So all 3 consortia deal with differentiation in different aspects of differentiation. So I read through all the 3 proposals. And then I have to say quite self-critically that these are good projects, well structured, but I would call none of them academically exceptionally innovative. They all deal with a very well-known concepts of Europeanization, differentiation, socialization, norm cycle, and so on and so on. So, but these are the 3 projects that won out of 50. So as you can see, this is something that I would not consider particularly academically excellent, but still it won. So be aware of the different definition of what of project excellence means in different contexts. And my final, and it might sound ridiculous a bit, but my final advice is have an experienced project manager. And again, I cannot underscore this too much. If an institution wants you to submit a grant and they do not provide you with project supports in all phases, and I underline that in all phases of the project, then it is not a good institution. And I'm afraid that the number of Czech institutions still lack on this point. And as I say, it's important in all the phases of the project, not only during the application, but also if you receive it, when you write interim reports, when you report on all the phases of the project. Because again, as and I come back to the previous point, the language and the style of application differs from agency to agency. And if you have a manager who has experience with these specific types of submission, this is just priceless. The ERC, Horizon, national agencies, very different projects, and it's not possible for one person, I mean, for one researcher to master all of that. So if you have a person who will help you with, you know, like polishing the project so that it complies, so that it contains all the keywords they expect you to have in the project, that is invaluable. It is, as I say, this is essential with some projects, especially with the big ones, like the Horizon 2020 RIA, Research and Innovation Action, because these are huge consortia, and just administratively, it is almost impossible to do without even a project support team, not just one project manager. Now, these are the 3 general points. I have been some remarks on my personal strategy, but I'll leave that for the Q&A session. So thank you very much.
So thank you really a lot for these insights. I mean, I think that there is so much to talk about what you just explained, I think. And I'm actually really curious if the other speakers actually agree with you, what you just mentioned, especially this idea that a grant agency, that the grant application process is kind of a disciplinary process that actually reduces your creativity and makes you just one part of this big watch clockwork.
Well, hopefully they don't agree, so that we have some discussion here.
Exactly. So let's see. So really cool. Thank you very much. And then yeah, let's continue with you, Ondřej. Please, your floor.
Thank you, Kamil. I'm very glad to be taking part in this discussion. And let me start by saying that to a great degree, I agree with Petr. I think there is an element of disciplinarity. There is an element of governmentality. We learn how to conduct ourselves. But certainly, there is a neoliberal logic at play in the way that that science, including social science, is managed in our societies. And one area where I think we see this very clearly is the changing balance between the institutional support for research and the grant support. And this is an ongoing discussion in the government, the Czech government now, where there is a national system for evaluation of science, but there are currently interventions in the sense that, you know, more and more resources should be allocated on a project basis, because it's more easily evaluated. The results are more easily evaluated, calculated, accounted for, and I think it's perfectly legitimate to resist this logic. At the same time, this is the environment that we operate in. So this is sort of the meta context in which we have this discussion. The second important sort of meso level point that Petr referred to is that grant making and solving is social practice. It can possibly be disciplinary practice. It socializes one in the discipline, and it comes at a cost. On the other hand, it brings you money. It brings you prestige. This goes particularly for some schemes like European Research Council grants or even Primus grants at Charles University. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that this should not be a goal in itself, but having a nice grant allows you to do things. It provides you with resources, both material and immaterial or cultural ones. It allows you to do what you want to do, to define your own work. And I think that's one of the great I guess benefits of what we do, even with the caveat and even with the brackets, that it is important to keep in mind that we enjoy as researchers. So I would say this by way of introduction, and I'll try to structure my presentation in three points. I think it's important to talk about not only success, but also failure if we want to aspire to excellence. I think that in preparing grant applications, it's essential to look at the ideas that we have through other people's eyes. And the third point will relate to diversity. I come to this with experience with various bodies, Gaccer, Thatcher, Primus, both successful and unsuccessful. And my personal experience is, and reflection on this experience of mine, is that sometimes it's perfectly in one's power to sort of, let's say, modulate the outcome of what we do, and the failure in my case has been the result of inexperience, of haste, overlooking something important, of pride in not consulting sufficiently with peers because I didn't want to be seen as lacking in knowledge or incompetent. But also sometimes the failure has been beyond my power. I mean, I've encountered a number of petty sovereigns in the process, reviewers who were not exactly on spot in making critical remarks about applications, panels deciding in a way which continues to baffle me. And I think it's important to kind of be self-reflective, of course, but also not be discouraged by these sort of, let's say, imperfect outcomes of the evaluation process. Talk about it and keep going. The second point is about looking at the project through other people's eyes, and I think this is absolutely essential. You have this idea that you think is a brilliant one, and now what? Of course, it's worth checking whether someone has had that idea before, and it so often happens that someone has, and this necessarily doesn't have to discourage you from pursuing this, but it's of course important to be aware. Then, you know, when this is a collaborative research design, you need to enroll other people to support your idea. I mean, to want to team up with you, and you have to convince them and present the argument persuasively to them. You have to choose the bodies that might provide support to your grants based on the kind of projects or even outcomes that they support. Now, in the Czech context, we have Gaccer and we have Thatcher. Gaccer primarily supports the basic research journal publications and books. Thatcher is much less keen on supporting these, and I've had experience with Thatcher applications where we thought it actually wouldn't hurt. It might only kind of reinforce the project to pledge to publish the results of the research also in an academic journal. And you know, to our surprise, we found that this was not only seen as something positive, but as actually something that that degraded the proposal in the view of the reviewers. So it's very important to gain this awareness, to tailor, as Peter said, you know, the application to context, because there is indeed, and here I would agree and underline the point that he made, there is nothing such as a perfect, sort of universally perfect project application, but each one should be tailored to a particular purpose. Then of course, each of those bodies engages certain kinds of reviewers. So I think there are sort of multiple steps that I think it is useful to take to kind of distance oneself from the idea, from the concept of the grant, and try to look at it from other people's eyes, and it can only improve the result. And the final point is diversity. Again, if we talk kind of collaborative research projects here, I think it's very useful in my experience to think in advance what colleagues I want to work this on, provided that what you know we are talking about is a truly collaborative enterprise, the way it should be, something where people get together and they together produce something more that each of one could have produced on his or her own separately. And it's important to think about various roles that have to be covered in the project. And obviously it's very important to have a good project management in place, as Petr said, but even research roles, to have perhaps someone more senior, also someone more junior, and some of the grant bodies, including Thatcher, now pay more attention to this, even in the formal guidelines that they give out to reviewers, to have this diversity, both in terms of let's say the generational place of people in the team, and of course gender balance also. So it's about that. It's about equal opportunities. It's about seniority and juniority, but it's also about kind of more personal, I'd say, habitus research. So some people can offer, let's say, more deliberative type of work. So some are really hardworking, can push things forward. So think of this really as, you know, composing a team of people that you'd like to work to some kind of joint purpose. And this is a very practical note that I would like to conclude with. You know, when you think about assembling the research team in advance before you submit the grant application, in my experience, it's rather useful to have clarity about who is going to do what. Because again, in my experience, it can be tempting to approach someone that you really want to work with, and he or she is incredibly busy, and there is a certain kind of deliberate ambiguity about, you know, how actually this person will contribute to the grant. You know, once we get it, we'll talk about that. And obviously, this is one way to go. But I think some clarity is the best insurance policy that you have against, you know, future disappointment in this respect. And it may be that it's better to look for someone where you are actually sure that this person will commit to the project once you have succeeded. So I'll stop here, pass the floor to my colleagues, and be happy to answer all questions later on.
All right. Thank you very much, Ondřej, for these explanations. And I believe a lot of people who are viewing will definitely jump in on this question. At least I think what to do if you fail, and how actually to self-improve in this way that what you mentioned, and also this assembling of teams. I think this is not something straightforward for a I'm sorry, for an early career researcher who doesn't have a big network yet and does not know everybody in the field, and might be hesitant to ask, for instance, a senior researcher who already has a lot of experience to join in a project that he actually as a junior researcher would like to conduct. So I think that there is a lot to unpack in the Q&A session. So thanks a lot. And yeah, let's jump on without further ado now to you, Šárka. Again, thanks very much that you joined us. And this time the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kamil. And I will try to skip the intro on the environment we are in, because I think these are much more systematic patterns we don't agree with, we are very frustrated to deal with, but for early career academics it can be quite discouraging if we start with this like dark, I would say, image of Czech science that we all face and we deal with. So I will be a bit more practical and I would say even optimistic, because my points, I will start, my first point would be on healthy level of pragmatism, which I think is very important, and to distinguish between different stages when you apply. And I will talk from my experience, because this situation can very much change. So what is your primary motivation for applying really matters. And while research, I would say, should be the most important motivation, of course, it is different whether you apply or you are a member of a team in your very first year of your PhD study, or you are in your postdoc situation, etc., etc. So it very much changes. And while it would be great to always be motivated by your own project and by your own scientific interest, it might be not always possible, and it's not necessarily bad if you are, as I say, pragmatic, especially in the very early stage. So at that point, I would slightly disagree with Petr, and I will get back to this. Then I will talk more about the team composition, and here I would totally agree with both my colleagues, with Petr and Ondřej, that people matter mostly. I would stress this is very important. How to build a team and how to choose the right people, for me, is the most important part, because while you might be frustrated by the application process, and then especially during the years you have to deal with the project, it makes a big difference what people you cooperate with and how do they contribute, or how do you manage the team. And then my final point will be on the, I would say, project and the outputs, the outcomes. So how to practically draft the project in a way that it does not put too much pressure on you, and how to avoid mistakes that I have done. So I will try to be also self-reflective and talk about my experiences when I applied, and how did I struggle with the promises, and how to actually make the good ratio of what is expected and then what is deliverable. So how can you really achieve the outcomes? So I will start from the motivations and the changing situations. So when I was talking about healthy pragmatism, I think from my experience, as I was doing my PhD in the Institute of International Relations with my colleagues who are here present, I think it was really important for me that I was invited in the very early years, not necessarily on the position to deliver the research outcomes, but also as, for example, to help with the administration and management. And it might be considered as something not that important, but for me, it was actually crucial to understand the language, the terms, the concepts in the applications, and how to even understand how the whole team cooperates. So if you are surrounded by a good team of people and they do not completely exploit you and they don't put too much pressure on you, which was not my experience, it was very positive for me that I actually started in the institute from the very beginning to be part of the project, to write a publication as co-author, but also with the administration and management, which helped me to understand the logic of the project. So in these very early years, I'm really thankful for that experience, because later on I could use it, and then very early I applied for Gotcha postdoc, and then currently I'm actually having a standard Gotcha project as the core investigator. Actually, I'm leading the team. So from these, like I would say, small steps, you can gain experiences at different levels. And I'm actually very thankful that I learned this strategy, and it was definitely not waste of time. At the same time, I would distinguish different types of projects, and I think too much pragmatism can be not very good. And at that point, I would agree with Ondřej that you have to understand different types of grants and where the pragmatism might be too much to deal with or to handle. So as I had pretty good experience with Gotcha, I would agree that with Gotcha you have to be very careful, because the projects are very different, and especially the expected outcomes, which are not very typical. They might be scientific reports, and typically they would be softwares or different types of research activities. They might not necessarily fit to the work we usually do. And then you cannot easily combine it with what you would do otherwise. So that would distract you very much from doing your PhD study, your dissertation, or even your early, I would say, postdoc research. So that would be something you have to do extra, and that can be very frustrating, where you feel that this is not something that helps you in your own research and you can combine it easily. It is practically something where you have to find the time. And then, as we hate it, still we are in the system where our results are put in the RID system. And if you are working for several years on a project where you know that the results will not be useful for that, it can be, again, very frustrating. And for me, it was simply too much. So as the results did not really fit to what I wanted to do, neither could I use the results. It was simply too much, and I was in the end very frustrated by that experience. And it seemed to me that at that point, it was a big project where there was relatively big money. It gave us freedom to travel and do different stuff. It was simply not worth it. I could feel that it was simply too much, as the work we were doing was still very much too much strategic, too strategically oriented as the expected outcomes from the technological agency, the results we promised to the ministry at the beginning, because that's what you have to do first, and then practically doing service to an entity that is expecting something where I cannot really do what I want. It was simply too much. So I think this like healthy level of pragmatism, where you should not take way too many steps to completely lose your own research and your own interest in what you are doing. But otherwise, in the early years, I think it's completely fine to be open to different topics. I think some people might be very distinct and very clear about their research areas, while in early years, I personally was pretty open to different topics, and I did not mind to gain experience in grant applications where I not necessarily could contribute with my specific research area, which I did, but still I could gain experiences. So it was still pretty helpful for me, and I did not mind at all. And then, of course, later on, currently, I would probably not do the same sacrifice, or I would not be that flexible. So at this point, at this stage, I can choose my own topics, and I can practically draft the application in the sense that research comes first and my topics come first. So the flexibility that I had in my early career years give me more freedom now, when I'm in the position that I can actually really work just on the topics and areas that I'm interested in, and I can choose freely. Now I get to the second point about people, because I think this is very important, how to cooperate and how to choose the right people. I would totally agree that you should not be too strategic, and especially it might be tempting to invite superstars and people that can increase the citation, ratio, etc. It can be quite dangerous, because these people would be probably less open to cooperate, not necessarily, but you firstly have to know the people. So it's good to cooperate with people you have experience with, you know them personally, because there is a lot at stake, especially if you are responsible for the project. At some point, you will be in the position that the people have to be loyal to you. They have to provide the results. They have to help you with the project. And if you invite people that you don't know and that are more concerned about their own career, their own projects, etc., you have practically no pressure point how to make sure that they provide the results, they help you with the project, they come to the meetings, they are constructive, etc. At the same time, I don't think there is such a clear correlation that the more senior people are, the less flexible, open, and cooperative or supportive. I have actually very opposite experience. So I was lucky enough to meet individual senior researchers who were actually very open to cooperate. They were very supportive to consult, to provide feedback, to help, etc. And I think it's also important, don't be shy and afraid to a little bit break the barriers and the classical roles that we are in, because typically senior researchers who already have experience with leading projects, you might feel shy to ask them if they would be members of the team you are actually willing to lead. And I was actually in this situation and I was kind of hesitating whether it is okay to ask my colleagues who used to be leaders of the team to be suddenly on a slightly lower position, to be core members, but not necessarily the leaders. And I think it is paradoxically very welcomed, because my colleagues who were in the position and they were facing all the frustrations with putting pressure on the members, managing, administrating projects, etc., they were actually very grateful that they were suddenly having the luxury of doing just research and helping with the research, but not having the same dilemma or pressure or work with the rest of the work within the project. So they were very happy actually to be on board on a different position and enjoy the different roles. So in that sense, I think don't be shy. And these people are excellent because they have experience not only with research, but also with management of the project, etc. And they can help you very much. Again, if you know them in person and they are open, I think it can be a great experience and it can be very valuable. At the same time, diversity is important. I would agree with this. And again, if you invite early year academics, it's important that you know these people are reliable, they are interested in research, they know what the application is about and what research is about. And here we come to the most important part, and that's really the output. So I would agree that it was very helpful for me to clarify from the very beginning, really very specifically, what would be the divide of labor. So literally when it comes to articles, books, who will do what and what do I expect from the people? So that is something you have to clarify. Usually your colleagues, if they are experienced, they would ask you themselves, you know, what do you expect? And that would be the important question before they promise to be on board. They would probably need to know themselves, what do you expect? So this is perfect. I would be even that formal to put it on paper, to have it in email so that it's clarified and everybody is transparent about who will do what. That is very important. It might change. I'm currently in the position that I did the mistake that I put way too many results on my chest. So as I was like inviting senior academics, I was too shy to ask way too many outcomes from them. So I practically was very strict on myself to actually do more work than I would be able to do. And then later on, as we were kind of redistributing the work, I started to ask, like, would you be maybe keen on doing or taking more active role? And this is all about communication. So again, I was lucky enough that we managed to do this redistribution and slightly changing the divide of labor so that it would work. And this is very important to communicate these things in the early stage. So once you feel that it might be too much, do not wait until the project is at the end, because that can be really stressful. And that is, again, I would say, lesson that I learned from my own experience with my postdoc, where I was practically not doing very good time management, and I was waiting too long to communicate that I might not be able to deliver the results that I promised, actually. And it's too late, of course, because then the only thing you can do is to prolong the final report and hope that you will be able to do it. So this is something that is really good to communicate from the very beginning, and still be strict in terms of thinking, will I be able to do this on time, and communicate this with the team. So that can be really prevented in the early stage. And also with the project manager. There I would totally agree. On the other hand, it's something where you cannot really choose. It's a person where you are either lucky to have in the team, in the institute you work for, you have a great project manager, which makes a huge difference. I can say, again, recently we hired a great person to the Metropolitan University, and my colleague is really great, not only for providing the support, but also being able to do the institutional communication, which helps a lot, because typically we as researchers are kind of dealing and struggling with the problem, how to explain the issues and the problems to the higher management of the institutions we work for. And as you have different projects and of course multiple results you have to deliver, it can be quite frustrating, and even we struggle with where to deliver first. Because if you have this overlap of different projects, and at some point you promise few publications, and then suddenly you are successful in with Gutcher or whatever, and then suddenly you have multiple research projects and multiple results you have to do, again, it can be too much for one person to handle. So good communication is really great, and having this middle person that can help you to communicate this to the management can help a lot. So we were lucky to have this new strategy where external grants come first. So if we have a Gutcher project, we can adjust, for example, the internal grant system, which is domestic. It's our internal university system. So if I would not deliver there, it would not be that problematic as for Gutcher. So this is very important to communicate these things and try to make some adjustments if possible, and their project manager can be very helpful, because this middle person can help you to communicate these things, and it does not look like you are trying to escape something you promised. It's rather a person that very smartly can explain how things work and what is possible and what is not. Because too much pressure on you, it can end up in this trap where you do not deliver anywhere. And that is the worst case scenario. I don't want to scare you, but it happens even to senior colleagues where they have simply way too many projects, and in the end, they have problems to deliver on every single level. So that can be very problematic, of course, personally, burnout, whatever. I don't want to talk about these things, but I think it may happen. I was with my postdoc, I was struggling with this situation where I was on maternity leave. So going back to the research process took me some time, and I had to postpone the final report and all that stuff. So I think my major lesson was good communication, good time management, and preventing these things at the early stage of the grant. But also, I think there tends to be this stress put on the formal results and formal evaluation. And some people might tell you that once you do not complete the project with everything you promised, you might get practically no chance in future. It's a nonsense, actually. From my experience, I think it's very individual. The evaluations are not always fair. There is a lot of, I would say, good luck and bad luck in the evaluation process, and a lot of unfairness. I would agree with that. But at the same time, I think especially if you are a junior or early career academic or researcher, there might be much more flexibility than you expect. And the evaluations might be actually quite generous, because of course, it does not mean that if you would not publish anything, you would be still, you know, successful. That's not the case. But simply there needs to be some ratio between what you delivered, and if there were some problems like long publication process, we are all facing these problems, I think, where the publication process, the review process might be taking too long, it's difficult. And again, it's good to communicate these things, because it happens to literally everybody, that you have a long process or you are surprised by the reviews, and these are just issues that are completely normal. They are standard part of our academic life, and it does not really matter at what stage you are, early career or very senior, the same system we are facing. So I think I would conclude with my very last tip that I have recently heard from my colleague who is working in the evaluation team at the grant agency, and he told me that the most important is really to draft a good proportional ratio between your own, I would say, academic profile, your career, so what you have so far achieved, and what you are promising in the project. So the balance between these two things, that you do not practically exaggerate the promise while having a CV where it's completely clear that so far you have no experience or lower experience with these types of publications, and strategically you just draft that you will do this and that because people just told you that this is what you have to do in the application. It's a nonsense. It's simply good to have a balance between what your capabilities are, what you are able to do within the time frame, and I think that is very important.
Okay, we need to continue slowly, but thank you a lot. I hope I didn't interrupt you now in the argument process.
Just concluding, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot, Šárka. I mean, I think we already have some overlapping notions between the speakers, where I think everybody agrees, and some things that there might be a bit where there are diverging opinions on. We will not jump with Michal. Michal, feel free. We will make the break maybe a bit shorter, or the Q&A session, we will see. But please feel free also to tell us all your experience and all your tips.
Right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I think these were all great points. I was actually taking careful notes myself, because I mean, this is always an ongoing process. So I'm basically, the reason why I'm here is that I'm trying to learn from my colleagues and from those participating in the discussion to increase my chances next time when I apply. I have three main points I want to talk about. One is that people shouldn't get discouraged, even though the process, even if successful, may still be frustrating indeed, as many have mentioned. And I want to talk about the people around the projects, not necessarily only the team of the project, but also people around, as has also been done, for instance, by Petr and others. And then finally, a bit about the application strategy, or what my own impressions, I'm really talking about impressions, experiences. I don't have any large end study or anything like that that could give me some confidence in what I'm saying. This is all going to be just my feelings from the discipline from the last 10 years and from all kinds of applications, as Ondřej mentioned, both successful and utterly unsuccessful over the years. So my first point, do not get discouraged. That's, I think, the best label for it. Now the process, and basically all my predecessors have alluded to these problems. The process is difficult. I mean, it's in the discipline, it has disciplinary effects. It forces you to behave in certain ways, to accept the language, the hierarchies. There is some kind of built-in neoliberal logic, as Ondřej has mentioned. There's a lot of competition, and it's annoying because in a competition, many people lose and only few win. So if you have chances of, say, 20–30% with grant application, you know that a lot of people are applying who are good, experienced. You know that the chances are not very high to start with. You may not be very encouraged at the very beginning. With some schemes, you have maybe 10% chance, and you know that already those who are applying have very strong profiles. So this is already a frustrating experience at the beginning. Then you end up with a lot of reviews. Some of them are really poor. You feel that they are not really competent. The person hasn't read the proposal properly. then you finally get it eventually, and then you have all these troubles with people not doing their work, and then you have all these deliverables you are unable to deliver and all this. So it's kind of annoying, but at the same time, this is money that buy you living, that enable you to do cool stuff, that enable you to do research, and it's ultimately public resources, and there needs to be some way to distribute them. So I think in some regards, I think it's kind of healthy to think of it in these very pragmatic terms. There is a game in town. It has certain rules. Some people might not play by the rules all the time, but basically, by and large, we are trying to find a way how to distribute money to researchers in a more or less transparent, meaningful, accountable way, perhaps. And we need to play by the rules and play the game if we are in the discipline, whether we like it or not. I think for a person at the early stage of one's career, I think pragmatically speaking, it's good to just go with what the system offers and try to change the system once you are in more senior positions, like some of the colleagues on the panel are, and they might be more in a position to maybe think more deeply about how the system works and how you can maybe reform it and improve it. I would not get discouraged by the numbers. A lot of people, low numbers, so low success rates. A lot of people submit projects or submit applications just because they have to. It's part of their institutional obligations. So they submit the stuff just to be submitted without actually doing precisely what Petr mentioned at the beginning, really writing a proposal which they want to work on. These applications often will not be very good quality. So the competition in the end may not be as high as it seems from the numbers that you get at the end of the year or in a yearly report from some funding agency where it all seems impossible to get the money. And then you find out that actually people around you eventually get the money if they apply every now and then. So it's probably not as bad as it seems from the start. In the process, it happens to all of us. I guess it's very similar to submitting submitting papers to journals. You get reviews. They are, as I mentioned, often unfair. You think that the person hasn't read it properly. There is a lot of randomness. You need to be lucky with who gets to review it. Of course, you are never going to find out who reviewed the project, or with most applications. So you have no clue what's happening inside the black box. I mean, I would personally say, if you submit a proposal, it doesn't work out, and you get really poor reviews and it's not good, I would seriously think about what I have done wrong, whether I can dramatically improve the project. But sometimes I think, okay, maybe I was just unlucky, and I do precisely what Petr said not to do. I would submit it again to a different funding agency. I would say, let's see, maybe I will have better luck this time. It's a lot of work writing a research project. A good research project takes, in my perspective, something similar, a similar amount of time to a nice journal article. In some regards, I would say that this is a long-term process. So if you have invested your time and energy and mental capacities into doing that, just submit it again. And if it doesn't work out and you can submit it again, then do it again. I mean, just to keep it rolling, and let's hope that something works out. Of course, one needs to be careful, a bit self-reflective, but maybe, I mean, our academic culture tends to make people a little bit too self-reflective and always self-critical, and maybe I'm not good enough. I would just say go for it and try it again at least once, while giving it a serious consideration. Moving to the second point, team or the people around the project. I think it's absolutely crucial what Petr mentioned and Šárka now also mentioned, like support from administration or project manager. I think this is a vital thing. It's important to seek assistance from the administrative staff, especially if they are experienced, and you can see it. You can see the difference these people can make in the project because they've seen dozens, sometimes hundreds of applications, and they can help you both with the formalities, but sometimes also with the substance, that they have some sense. They can give you small little advice that may in the end be very, very important. I would say seek support from your colleagues. I mean, people tend to be secretive with project applications. It's your great idea. You want to apply for a lot of money with that. Okay, do not send it to, for comments to your likely direct competitor. But maybe if you can find a person, ideally in a different country, who is not likely to apply for the same scheme, who works on the topic, ask for help, because this is absolutely crucial. I think Ondřej talked about it quite a bit, about this, getting this outsider eyes on the project, because one is so immersed in the topic, and it's so important to get, I would say even more important, to get perspectives of a non-expert in the field. So to get insight from those who are, of course, broadly in your discipline, let's say in political science in our case, but who do not work on your topic, because they are very likely more similar to the reviewer of the project than a colleague who works on exactly the same topic. Ultimately, at least they will be similar to those on the panel, if not the reviewers, the professional reviewers themselves. So I would say seek support from colleagues and try to make stuff as simple as possible in the application, because people from outside of your narrow focus will be looking at the project at some stage of the process, and they will be those ultimately deciding on the panel, right? While of course building on the reviews by those who should understand the topic very, very well. And I would just make one not critical, but I will speculate a bit that the point that has been raised by Šárka in particular, but also by others, about dividing the work, about planning for who is going to do what work in the project when you are writing it. I would disagree a bit. I mean, I totally get the point, and I think it can be frustrating and all that. Having said that, if you start with that already in the project proposal phase, you are turning what in negotiation theory they call value creating negotiations to value claiming or distributional negotiations, and you might not get anywhere in the first place. I think there needs to be some basic level of confidence that all these people are saying they understand some kind of basic rules of how we work in the discipline, and then you can kind of start baking the cake together before cutting it. So I would just qualify that point a little bit. And finally, with regard to say application strategies, I think there are, I mean, we know all these options that have been mentioned. I would also highlight the institutional platforms, which are becoming very important in last years, which is great, like the Centers of Excellence and the Primus scheme, for instance. I think there are new schemes for PhD students. So the STAR scheme, this is all very interesting. Of course, the ERC scheme is there as well, although there the chances are extreme. I've had an unsuccessful application this year, so I went through all this process. It was extremely difficult. I think I totally agree with what Petr mentioned, that these schemes often have different philosophy behind them. They expect you to do different things, and you need to speak the language of these schemes. So in that regard, I would totally agree. You need to adjust the proposal, the idea, the ambition of the project to where you are applying and what you are applying with, what type of project you are applying with. But at the same time, I would say the key thing ultimately for me is, again, I would maybe highlight what Šárka mentioned towards the end, being realistic with what you are promising, with what you are promising to deliver, with what you are promising to be able to come up with in terms of like innovation, possibly even excellence, as Petr talked about it. So on the one hand, with what you promise in these terms, the ambition of the project, which will kind of make people excited about it, but on the other hand, your proven record. And I think my feeling is that this is absolutely essential. The credibility of the applicant is crucial for the chances of success, because if you promise for APSR articles, you have never had anything, never near something like APSR or IO, then you are not going to look credible, and it's going to go down the hole immediately. That's my impression. I don't know, but that's my feeling. So anyway, I just wanted to raise these points, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
All right, thank you, Michal, for this actually very, to some degree, diverging ideas on what we heard before, which is great because this might elicit some more interesting discussion later in the Q&A session. So just to make a snapshot, we have now around 40 viewers, which is quite a bit actually. And now we have 11:14. Let's make a break until 11:25. That's 10 minutes break, like you want less? You want less? Okay, then let's make 11:10, 5 minutes break. 11:20, we will be back here. I already have several questions from the audience. I have also my own questions that I will ask here. So please take the time and get some new coffee, and we will see each other in 6 minutes. All right. We are going to start. I mean, we are still not. Peter is here. All right. Very cool. So we have several questions that we have here. I will actually start with one question that came just now at the end. I will go through all the questions of the viewers so far, what we have. But one question that I think might be interesting for actually becoming parents or parents. And the question is, let me just see. So I would be, one viewer is asking, I would be interested in the experience for women and men actually with children and grant management. So basically how to incorporate this transition, this phase in your life where you go either to maternity leave as a woman, maybe Šárka, you can talk a little bit about this, but also as a father, if you need to take a sabbatical, if you need to take free time, or you need to take a recess from the project, and how you actually are able to accommodate all your tasks. So maybe let's start with you, Šárka. Maybe you, because you have your distinctive perspective as a woman, and maybe if then somebody else, Peter or Ondřej or Michal, you want to jump in.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's difficult, of course. So you have different options from my experience, because I was having my postdoc gutture while being pregnant and actually then continuing while having really a baby. So that was the period when I was supposed to deliver the results, do all the publications and etc. So I had two options, either to interrupt the project, which is possible, and I think at that point it was possible. The conditions changed, so the scheme might be different now, but I think it was always possible for in this situation to apply at the agency to simply interrupt the project and step back again. I think it was possible for 1 or 2 years. Then what I did, actually, I was continuing instead because I was in the final stage of the project. So I rather postponed the evaluation report to 1.5, I think it was 1 year. So it gave me more time to deliver the results, and I managed. It was pretty difficult, I have to say, but I think it very much depends if you have a support from your family and especially your partner. Academic couple, so I think that is the most important element for me, that my husband understands the type of work and we divide the labor really well. So in that sense, it very much depends on your individual situation, whether you have good support from your family, friends, and your partner. I think it's doable. That is probably the most important question. And again, you can very well combine it if people help you. Now I'm in the position that my
It's such a complicated topic that it even stopped.
Yes, we somehow lost Šárka. But everybody else is fine, I think. So let's give Šárka a couple of seconds. If she doesn't come back, we will just continue, and then I hope like, our technical assistants will somehow manage it with Šárka. No, now she disappeared completely. So it looks on her side that there is some problem. So all right, so our technical team is continuing with that. Maybe Peter, you would like to continue, or do you have something to say?
I don't have my kids of my own, so it doesn't directly apply to me, but I do have experience in the team I led, that because of course it's 3 years and you apply sometime before, so it's basically 4 years, and it's simply you can never predict when somebody gets pregnant or a partner of a team member gets pregnant, which happened in my project. And then again, it's very good to know in advance what Šárka just mentioned, like with the grant agency, Czech grant agency, you have these, it's a weird number, 577 days by which you can delay the final, the rest of the final report, which is quite a lot. In fact, when you know, it's 1.5 years, basically. So it helped us to fulfill all the publication goals a bit too late, but we've managed. And as I say, similar possibility of postponing the deadline apply to most projects of this type. So it is doable. Of course, it's more difficult in the bigger EU-related consortia where this possibility does not exist. But then again, you have a large team. So if one member falls out, then it is much easier to replace that person than in a team of 3 or 4. So it's doable, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you for your insight. Maybe Michal or Ondřej, you have something to add to this question?
I think, like from my perspective, I do have kids, small babies, and I think, I mean, from my perspective, this is one of perhaps the most important, the most problematic, but one of several different dimensions in which it is very difficult to combine academic life with or maintain some work-life balance. And I think this is a kind of frustrating aspect of academia as well. So I would just, many people in academia tend to work a lot. And I think this is very difficult. I mean, that's just my point, is that it's very difficult to combine it with private life. And I have all the admiration for people who manage that, especially for women who manage that at that stage of their careers, because this is precisely the moment when you want to get started. You want to get your first good publications, you apply for projects and all this. And of course, then you feel pressures from different dimensions or from different directions. And this is very difficult to manage, as far as I can tell. But of course, I do not have the experience myself directly.
If I may, I would completely agree with what Michal said before. I guess it's particularly challenging for early career researchers just after their PhDs and early stages of their career. But one perhaps practical advice is to hone your time management skills as much as you can and as early as you can, because you're going to need it, either because you will want to have decent work-family balance, but also as you will get more positions of responsibility, and you will need to divide your time between research, teaching, sitting on committees, and reforming the mechanism of the science for the better. This is going to take a lot of time and divided attention, and it's important, I guess. And again, speaking from my personal experience, I wish I had done a better job on myself when I was younger. You will just look back at those years when you were only a PhD candidate. You will perhaps forget about the frustration, all the frustration that came with trying to finish your PhD, and you will look back with nostalgia at how much time you had to dedicate to research. So time management can help. It's not a panacea. It's not a solution, but it can definitely help to organize your work better.
All right, thank you, Ondřej, for this insight. So basically, we are left with these two general advices. Have a partner who's academic in the best case, so he actually knows what's going on with you. And yeah, be good in your time management. Šárka, we lost you at the end a little bit. Would you like to finish? Yeah.
I'm sorry. It was connection problem, but actually my husband and the kid just came. So if you hear some noises, that's how we deal with the with working and the family. No, I think that was it. That was most of it. Good time management and supportive partner. That's all I would say is that matters.
May I just add something? Just one related thing that is not directly about having kids, but I think it's related. My experience from the Gotcha panel from the grant agency was that very often, especially the junior applicants, are over ambitious in terms of the publication output. I remember discussing that with Šárka some time ago about how ambitious the list of publications was. And very often it happens that even the reviewers from abroad in their reviews write that the number of publications, the projects, the teams promise are just crazy. I can give you one example. I was trying to look it up, but I remember one that was a team of 4, and they promised to publish 2 books and 8 articles in a 3-year project. And that, I think, is clearly over the top entirely. And I understand the logic, because there were years, and there I would slightly disagree with Michal, because there really were years where the success rate was only 8% in the political science panel. So clearly the competition was huge, and you tried every possible strategy of increasing your chances. And one of those strategies was increasing the number of promised articles and books. But then, of course, and especially when you have kids, then, I mean, 8 articles and 2 books, this is simply something nobody expects, even speaking about the international reviewer. So I would, rather stress other qualities of the project rather than the huge number of publications you promise.
All right, thank you for this insight. This, I think, haunts back to the beginning to be pragmatic in what you, to have this healthy pragmatism, as it was framed, I think, by you, Šárka, to not overpromise too much, but not go too low in the bar. Let me just jump in with another question that we have. One viewer asking something is more specific, like we are in the political science field, and the question is, can somebody talk about the absolute basics? So what kind of grants actually should an early career researcher or somebody who is now in his PhD and then transitions into this postdoc life, which grants should he specifically target in the beginning? Because we have all this divergence of GAUK, we have GACHER, but we have also European projects that are possible. So where should you start? Is there somebody that you can, because you have a limited amount of time that you can invest in your grant application. So you need to be selective what you're choosing and what you're organizing. So where would you tell the student or the early career researcher, where should he go? And maybe let's make it a bit reverse now, that we go from the bottom of the panel list. Maybe Michal, you could start.
This is a difficult question, and I think it's to a large extent individual. I think, by the way, in general, I think with these topics that you are discussing today, it's always difficult to generalize, especially from one's own limited experience. And I think people like Petr, who have been on review panels, have much broader view. My perspective actually is that you should apply everywhere. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit now, but I think you are starting to start your career, and there is a limited number of options. As you mentioned, we have talked about them. Like in our context, it's going to be GACHER. Within the university, it's going to be a GAUK for PhD students, or the STAR program now, or it's going to be Primus or postdoc researchers. The European institutions, the European funding, you either are inviting as a junior researcher, you either have really excellent results, and then you are invited, or you are friends, you are buddies with someone who is starting a Horizon project or something like that, and invite you there because they know that you are good and they know you personally. Or I mean, otherwise it's really difficult to get connected to these projects. In my view, you need to. It's difficult to start it for yourself. And with ERC projects, this is extremely competitive as well. And I mean, so I really think that, like, pragmatically, you end up with a bunch of check options that are there, depending on the institution you are at, right? You might have the nice institutional insight, in-house options, but I think you should just apply to all of them. If they are kind of broadly, okay, I'm doing primary research, so I'm going to go through all these and recycle the submissions until I get accepted. If I think that the submission is good, if I get feedback from colleagues and others that the ideas are not that great, they're over ambitious or under ambitious, and okay, forget it and come up with a new project. But I think the best thing is just to try to deal with the randomness of the process by revising the projects after they fail, but then submitting them again, as we do with papers. You submit up, then it gets rejected, you submit again a bit lower or at the same level, and then keep trying, because then ultimately it's going to succeed if the project is good. So that's my only piece of advice here.
All right, thank you. Maybe Šárka, some thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think it is, again, I would agree that it's very individual. It depends on your experience and your ambition. I would say that is very important. So if you are a PhD student, I would probably start with the, internal domestic, like institutional grants. That would be probably the best starting point. So if you have literally zero experience and you have no publication record, I don't think there is much point of trying Gotcha, because there is really zero chance you would get accepted if you do not have some substantial list of publications. So in that sense, the best would be probably some internal grant system, whether it's GAUK or any institution has different standards. And then once you, through this, get some publications and you have some research experiences, it makes sense to start probably with Gotcha and go through this sort of, I would say, hierarchy of grants. Now with the new scheme, I think the junior Gotchas are more convenient that they are longer, so you can work for 5 years. And what is very important, because some years back there was this very important condition that you had to spend several years abroad. It's no longer there, so that can be very important, I would say, change, because it was a bar that a lot of people could not simply meet, because like doing their research abroad for substantial time after completing their PhD, not really during the PhD process, that was something very strict, I think, to expect. But now the condition is no longer there. So I think that can be giving more flexibility to the applicants. On the other hand, where I see the major challenge in that sense, that you have to already build your team. It's no longer just individual application. You have to create your team. And it has, I would say, comparable structure when it comes to the outputs and what you have to deliver. So in that sense, it can be slightly more challenging, but it's possible. My colleague recently got one from Metropolitan, thanks to his profile that he was already slightly experienced when it comes to publications. And I think that is very important to start with research, having some good publications, and then you inevitably increase your chances to get accepted in any grant agency. I think in that sense, they would be very similar.
Okay, great. Ondřej, any thoughts about this?
I only have two brief points to make. One false one when I said before that with all the brackets in caveats in place, having a grant helps you define your work. But it also defines where you will be in a few years' time. And so when deciding what grant agency you want to submit your grant to, this comes with a choice also how you approach the deliverables of your research. It's also important to keep this in mind. So when you are a junior scholar at university, you might want to think twice about applying with Toucher. But Toucher is most likely going to expect deliverables that are not academic and that might not be really seen as sort of very well received, or may not be very well received in your university's ranking. And if you work in the Institute of International Relations in a sort of hybrid institution where we engage in both academic and applied research, I mean, universities do too, but the balance may be slightly different there. It's a different game. When it comes to opportunities for early career scholars, I would only add that in addition to GAUK, now there is a consortium of several Czech public universities that benefit from the operational program research and development. It's called START or something, and it allows PhD students to get together and form research teams and work together. So I think this is now one opportunity that hasn't been there before. It might be worth exploring as well.
But that's great that actually now this kind of ideas are popping up, junior Gotcha start. So this sounds really nice. Petr, do you have some remarks?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do indeed. I have several short points. So my first point would be that I would definitely start with university-based research, because I've been recently sitting on several committees evaluating internal grants at various Czech universities. And previously I had just a limited experience with this kind of research as a team member or a leader of a team, but not on the committee. And I was really surprised how much money you get for how little output in this type of research projects compared with the grant agency, for instance. So there, I think this is really the good way to go. It's more money for less output, of course, less prestige, but as a starting point, I think this is really good. As Šárka mentioned, that was the point I wanted to underline as well. I was extremely critical of the condition in the junior grants, with the stay abroad after the PhD, which was simply impossible for most people to meet the criterion. So it finally, after years of complaints, has been removed. So that's also a relatively easy way to start. Now, I want to come back to the first point I mentioned. I think that, of course, the advice would be team up with excellent scholars. But how you do that? I think it's because these projects should be an organic part of your career. You meet people at conferences, you present your results, you discuss them, or they are discussants of your papers, and then you get to know them. And then, of course, it's much easier. And I think that is probably what also Šárka did when she approached some senior scholar. It was probably not somebody she didn't know at all before, but somebody we met somewhere, and now you approach them. Do you remember me? And could you or would you be willing to take part in the project with me? And this way also, I think the participation in EU programs, the big consortia, I think it's always, and I hesitate whether to say almost always or always, based on networking, either personal networking or institutional ties. That, I think, is the only way how you get into that these big consortia. But again, let's put that in perspective. It is not exceptional that when you apply, to give you just one example from a recent tender research and innovation action, there were, I think, 35 consortia, so altogether several hundred institutions, and just one consortium gets awarded. So the chance of success is really, really low. And that's why I'm so skeptical of the whole scheme, because it's so much effort and so much time spent on that, and just one gets awarded. So there it's really difficult to get in. And then, of course, it depends, but that's a different question, on what institutions the consortium is composed of, etc. So, but that is definitely not the starting option for junior scholars.
All right, thanks a lot. I mean, this also raises the question, how do you network during Corona pandemic? I mean, would have been nice to meet you all and to talk, but of course we will just see each other through the screen, and even inviting you for a beer might be problematic because you might end up 10 days in quarantine because of this simple idea. So I think that especially nowadays, it's also kind of a challenge to meet new people and to actually establish some kind of good faith. Because if you just see somebody in a conference in ECPR, you know, for 10 minutes, not for 10 minutes, but for half an hour through the screen, you don't know the person at all, even if he has a nice track record. So you don't know actually how to deal and how to assess the person. So I think that this kind of also makes it, if the conditions persist like this, will make it kind of difficult for creating new teams. Not sticking to your old social network is easy, but creating new social networks might be kind of difficult. Let me jump in. There is one particular question for you, Petr, where somebody asks, when you talked about the concept of academic excellence, you mentioned that 3 projects were chosen out of 50 applications. This was, I think, going back to very early when you had your presentation. do you have an information about the size of the teams for the 3 chosen projects? This means that do these consortia favor smaller or larger teams? And also, according to your experience in the field of political science, is it that smaller or larger teams usually get the grants? And I think the smaller or larger grants can be asked to everybody, but this is a specific question to these 3 projects of the 50 applications that were mentioned in the beginning.
Well, it very much depends on the time of action, but I'm speaking about the EU programs now. So it depends. They talk about actions, right? So it's 3 basic types of actions: innovation actions, research and innovation actions, and mobility actions. And then they have specific names like the ERC, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie, and so on. So the size of the team depends on the type of action. So for the mobility grants, it's typically just one person, Marie Skłodowska-Curie. So it's you, and you have to have a team of consultants and supervisors in various countries where you want to be based, usually 2 more, plus the university or an institute where you want to do research. Like a field trip or something like that. So that's very small. Then the second level is the ERC, where you have a lead researcher with a team typically. And then you have the type I was talking about before, and that's these big consortia, these 3 consortia that won, all are big. So in all of those, I think it's around 15 member institutions with 5 on average, 5 members per institution. So altogether it's like 5 times 15. So we have like 70 or even more, 70 plus researchers in all of those. So they are huge consortia. And there, of course, the only thing where I can see a pattern there, even though I'm not a believer in big N, unlike some others here, but still, if I try to present it as kind of without having any statistical evidence for that, then you would find that some institutions are much more successful than others. So, for instance, Istituto Affari Internazionali is a typical example. At the moment, Istituto Affari Internazionali, they have 15 EU projects running. So can you imagine that at one institution? So these are, like NUPI would be another example. Elcano would be another. So they are like these prominent players. And again, I wouldn't say that they are necessarily academically better than others, but they know their business kind of submitting the grant. They have good contacts, like even personal ones. So the only advice I can come up with is, in terms of composition of the consortia, is that you need these strong institutions there, because they have a much higher chance of success than and of course it's not saying that your own institution should be peripheral, but perhaps you can lead a work package, and next time or will be a leader of a paper, then next time the leader of a work package, and then perhaps you can apply as the lead institution the next time, but traditionally it's the big ones.
Thank you very much. I mean, okay. Anybody else has some thoughts on this dichotomy between small and large teams? What you prefer? Nobody jumping in? Okay, but I think this is also a question. I mean, when you're already having 75 researchers, a lot of institutions, I think this is not really for early career researcher a question. So, okay. Then I have a question. Now this is connected to when you have a team already, and you assemble the team, and you had already some idea about distribution of work. And what do you actually do if one of the persons really is not cooperative? How do you deal with this actually? Because do you just talk to him? Can you replace him? I don't know how this works. Do you risk it to get a bad a bad result, a bad evaluation in the end. Shoot them. Okay. So I'm curious to hear the personal experiences. Maybe Ondřej, maybe you can start here.
I'm not sure that there is one universally applicable strategy, but the point of departure obviously is that you are the principal investigator and you are the responsible one for the success or failure of the project. And with that responsibility, sometimes difficult decisions come. And if you avoid those decisions, the only result will be that you will be bearing an unproportional amount of the workload. And I have experience with that, because ultimately you want to make good on your pledge to the grant agency. You want your project to succeed. So that's basically your choice. Either you will sort of do more and let that person free ride, or you make perhaps difficult decision to make a change in the team. But obviously this is a choice that may be preceded by efforts to find a solution, to see what seems to be the trouble, why the person is not delivering on what you expected, whether there is, first of all, a common understanding on what is expected and how you can help that person to achieve what you expect as the team leader. But I guess this is not something that is relevant particularly to grants. It's applicable to any work setting when you have or you are in a position of responsibility. And obviously these are general principles that someone is sort of more, I guess, easy to apply. It's easy with applying in practice. Someone needs more practice. But I guess here I can only articulate them, try to articulate them.
Michal, do you have some thoughts on this?
I don't have any experience of this type, thankfully, so I probably don't have any meaningful advice. I think, but ultimately, like the answer, I think there was an implicit or even explicit question in what you asked. If you are the PI, then you are responsible. And as far as I know, in all the schemes that I came across, you are responsible for the team, and you can change the team. It's up to you to manage that, and you can make the intervention. And if you decide to do that, normally I think it's actually quite simple. I think it's going to be different and difficult with the consortia, because then you are playing a bit the politics as well and all that. But especially in smaller grants, you are the responsible person and you can kick the person out, which of course normally means a lot of costs for you and for possibly some conflict and all that. But it's your responsibility, which is also, I mean, ultimately the difficult point here, right? We are applying for funding. We are promising to deliver. We are promising to come up with ideas and output and new insights into the world we are studying. And then if someone doesn't take part, then you need to have this possibility to intervene and deal with it, which may not be totally pleasant, of course.
Šárka?
Yeah, I think I agree. It is pretty tricky, because I think the idea of like having the option to actually terminating the contract with someone, of course, formally it's possible, but the timing is against you, because most of the results are expected in the latter part of the project, which actually puts you in the position that most of the budget has been actually paid and given to the person, and then you are later dealing with the issue that the results are not there. So if it's this kind of issue, you don't have many maneuvering options, you know. So I think it is really difficult, and the best is really a good preventive strategy. Firstly, to choose people where you have some experience and you know they are not like having some issues with this, because if it's a long-term problem, that it's a person that typically, you know, deals with this, it might be, yeah, problematic. If it's a short-term problem that the person has some personal issues, whatever, I think it can be communicated. And what helped a lot, I think, is like co-authorship. So you can ask the person to team up with someone else from the team, maybe a foreigner, you know, someone has like minor role. And what I did preventively in my current project, that I teamed up people. So we have several like co-authored pieces where 2 people together write 2 articles. So I have 2 people responsible and they can kind of back up if anything would happen. It did not happen to me personally, but of course it's an issue that our friends, our colleagues were facing. So I have seen these situations. And I have not seen personally a situation where somebody would be formally like kicked out of a team. So what I have seen is usually like rather the burden of the leader that they try to compensate, you know, by publishing more or putting more pressure on other members of the team. It's not easy. So I think the best is to think preventively from the very beginning and communicate things as clearly as possible to make sure, that's why I stress that, to know that everybody knows what needs to be done, and there is not really much flexibility in that regard.
All right, Petr.
Well, I agree with Šárka. I think terminating a contract is an option that basically is theoretically available, but practically it's so difficult. And to find a replacement, then to ask somebody as a replacement in a running project, that is really weird and risky. So instead, what it happened to me only once, and then what I did was basically redistribute the tasks and worked myself more, because of course it's not really necessary that that particular person publishes that article. And if it is published, I mean, now I'm talking about the grant agency, if it is published by someone else, but it's the same type of article, then the agency is fine with it. So that's what I did. What is worse, however, and that, for instance, happened in one of the Horizon projects I participated in, is that a whole institution fails to respond. I mean, for instance, there was a sociological agency that was supposed to collect data from a particular country, and now they stop responding. Now that is a real difficulty, and then you have to find a replacement. But that's a different level of seriousness of the problem.
Okay, I mean, thank you a lot for your thoughts, because I believe, I mean, at least when you're a junior researcher and you start to form your team of other PhD students, for instance, and you're not sure, are they not overwhelmed with their own work, or if they're just starting out, do they really want to stay in academia? Maybe they will even change after 1 year. What do you do? So I thank you a lot for your thoughts. I will, because we are nearing now the 12 o'clock time, I will have one final question, which is a brief one. And I would be super happy if everybody could just give their his and her thoughts. And this is, when you look back on your own early career research times, when you just finished your postdoc, you started out with the grant application processes. If there is one thing that you would change with the knowledge you have now, what would it be? So when you look back, what would it be that you would say, if I just had known this earlier, what would it be? And let's make it in the order like we had it in the flyer. So Petr, maybe you could jump in.
Well, the simple thing would be, I would tell to my younger self to focus more on the research you really like. Not to succumb to the temptation of getting in projects you are not interested in, not succumb, or the run after publications just for the sake of titles. Really take your time and really do things you really love, and not just anything that comes across your way.
Sorry, thank you, Ondřej.
Yeah, do not get pushed by the environment, as Petr said, and be open, be listening to others, talk to people, just solicit all the advice that you can get, because there is no shame in doing that. And well, this neoliberal logic being there, science is a competitive business, but I think there is still a space for a lot of human decency in all that, and to the spirit of collaboration. And I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by people now that I feel I can meaningfully interact with concerning my ideas, and I you know, looking back, as you said, I think I could have discovered that a little bit shorter or earlier. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Šárka.
Okay, so I would say don't take criticism personally. You know, that is very important. Consider this as a thing that happens to everybody, no matter how senior they are. We all are rejected in academic journals at different stage of the career, so that's completely fine. Take criticism as something that helps, especially consider that some other people took a lot of time to write a review and they actually try to help. However, it looks painful and frustrating. It is a kind of help to progress. So take it constructively and trust yourself. Be patient with yourself. It takes time to progress and build your, you know, like research experiences. So be patient.
I would probably very much agree with what Šárka just mentioned, especially the first point, that there's going to be a lot of failures on the way, and you might not take these easily, especially at the beginning. You get, I think it's actually very similar to the journal publishing business. You get a lot of rejects because before you get an accept in a good journal. At least that's my experience. Way too many rejects before one single good accept. So I think it's similar with grant applications. Having said that, and being a little bit in opposition to the previous speakers, I mean, you might be at a stage at your career at which you need the grants, you need the funding, or you will be out of academia. And if you love academia as such, you might also want to compromise a bit on the topic, and you might want to be open. I'm not saying that this is something that you would oppose. I'm just like running my own story. I think you might want to be open to new topics, new approaches. You may want to learn completely unknown stuff to you from topics you didn't know you will actually enjoy working on. And I've learned myself personally a lot from grants, which I joined only for, which were not directly on the topic I thought was the dearest to my heart, but I learned a lot of in terms of management of projects and all this. So I would be that would basically be my key point. Like, do take failures as lightly as you would then want to enjoy the successes.
Okay, great. I mean, this was, I think, a really valuable discussion. I'm super happy we made it. I mean, just to wrap it up, we had approximately 40 viewers at the high point. And now people slowly went for lunch. So we are around 15, 20 people, which is, I think, already a great success, because this is more people than we could have ever fit actually in our office, just being there. I mean, no, we could not 40. I think 15, 20, yes, but not 40 for sure. This would be a bit, I think, much, especially in Corona times. So I would like to thank everybody here, Petr, Ondřej, Šárka, Michal, that you all joined. Michal, you want to say something in the end, or on behalf of the PRCP?
No, just thank you all. It was extremely interesting debate, and something that, well, it's very much relevant to all of us, and will be, I'm sure, that in the years to come. And yeah, I hope that we can keep these, collaborative seminars in the future as well. I'm not a big fan of this online thing, so I hope that next time we will actually have a chance to meet in person as well. But if not, we can still do this format. I'm sure that we can discuss with Kamil, maybe do some follow-up about publishing maybe, or something similar that is, again, something interesting for all of us. So thank you for joining us, and see you soon.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.